Good evening. On behalf of Jonathan Ball Publishers and Graffiti Books and Stationery, a warm welcome to this online virtual launch of Ryan Blumenthal's book, Autopsy. A warm welcome to you, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
And together with Ryan, we've got Jonathan Emit tonight that's going to chat to him. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Leonie.
Welcome to everybody, and I hope you're going to enjoy this evening with us. I'm so looking forward to this. If you think you're in the wrong country, you're not. This is Graffiti, and for the first time ever, we're speaking the taal. So for those of you that thought Graffiti only sells Afrikaans books, you're wrong. We also do the English books. But warm welcome to all of you. The book is available at www.graffitibooks.co.za, and we're giving you 20% discount, but you need to hurry because this book is already in reprint. There's a few copies available until the second print is available in the shops. So hurry and don't get caught without this book. I can guarantee you that one. If you have any questions through the evening, you're welcome to type it in the comments, and I will relay it to the two gentlemen that's going to chat to you. And now I'm going to hand you over to Jonathan and Ryan. Enjoy the evening with us.
Thanks, Leonie.
Jonathan, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You can talk. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just looking for Ryan. I can't see him at the moment.
I should be here.
Ah, there we go.
Yes.
How's it, Ryan?
Pleased to meet you.
Right. I'm going to get stuck straight into the book. We'll talk about some background in a moment, but first of all, what a fantastic book. For an avid reader of crime fiction and crime non-fiction and South African non-fiction reader as well, I was really fascinated by the book. It's an accessible, readable, extremely detailed, but also very empathetic record of your time as a forensic pathologist and the wonderful work that you've been doing over a number of years. I think let's just start off with your background and your inspiration for this line of work. I mean, where does that little spark or that inspiration come from, where you decide one day or over a number of years, this is what I want to do with my life? I think it's a very particular calling and definitely not for everyone. So I think our viewers would be very interested to hear what you found to be your inspiration.
Thank you for the question, Jonathan. So, as forensic pathologists, we are constantly exposed to death and dying. Every day, you wake up, you see death. So, I mean, it's like a cold wind that follows you every day. Like you think, is today the day, you know? And seeing so much stuff, I thought I have to get this on paper. So I wrote it as if I'm going to die, and as if I'm handing over this knowledge to a student. So you'll see that the entire book is written in second person. So it's like, so you want to be a forensic pathologist, and then it's like confiding. It's almost like Kitchen Confidential from Anthony Bourdain, but for mortuary world. But then what like really got to me is all our cases are so sensitive, you know, and the original version was about three times as long. So this current version that's out there has been watered down, it's been diluted, and it's been sanitized, because you cannot, you know, some of these cases are too sensitive to discuss. So there's nothing in there that's not, for example, in a newspaper or in court proceedings that's out there for the public's consumption. But I wanted to do it in such a way as, like, you know, people have to know about this stuff. It takes them out their comfort zone, and you know, and no one's done this for Africa. So I wanted to do something for, you know, what separates us on the African continent from other forensic pathologists on the rest of the world. So, for example, we've got African wildlife to contend with. We've got environmental things that are pathognomonically African, like lightning and veld fires. We have a host of post-mortem predator injuries such as rats and genets and different types of fish and crabs that affect bodies after death. And I just decided to focus on pathognomonically African forensics and the challenges we have in this country. This is not CSI Miami. We have specific, like we've got limited resources and depleted resources. And when there's so few of us, there's only about 56 forensic pathologists in the country. The rest of the autopsies are being performed in the periphery by general practitioners. So what are our challenges? What's an average day like? The average public hears all this bad news, and then that's where it ends. What happens after the murder or after the accident? And this is where my book begins. It's after that horrible newspaper heading. Then what happens? And my book is about the heroes, the unsung heroes that exist in Africa that are practicing forensics in the trenches. So it's not about me, it's about the unsung heroes. It's dedicated to those practicing forensics in Africa.
Well, Ryan, I think you've done an absolutely fantastic job in selling your book in about 3 or 4 minutes as a soundbite to any prospective readers. Let's talk about an average day on the job. What is a good day as a forensic pathologist? What does that look like? What are the small successes and victories that you achieve on the best day on the job?
Okay, I love that question. Thank you. I love your fierce intellect and insight. It's you have a fan in me here, eh? But every day in Africa is about small victories, and I make this very clear in the book. You never know. It's by the grace of God you go into that mortuary every day. There are so many challenges. Like you can have no water one day, no electricity one day, and if you've got no electricity, you cannot use an oscillating head saw, so you have to use a manual bandsaw. And if there's no running water, you have to get the fire department to come fill rubbish bins with water, and then you have to manually take a sponge and rinse the body and the organs with 50 liters of water from a municipal garbage can. Some days there may be blowfly invasion. Some days there may be labor relation issues. Some days the scales aren't working. Some days there's no lights, so you've got to then make a plan and take the organ under the sun, and look for pathology under sunlight. So you've got to be flexible. And then these are small little victories. If everything's working harmoniously and it's like a team, it's this what I call free flow state. Everything just works together and brilliantly, and that's just a part of the chain, because we're just a part of the train. There's forensic police involved. There's ballistic experts. It's a whole chain till the end to the courts. I'm but one link in the chain, and I must know my part. But there's an entire team, and if everything works brilliantly, then that is success.
Ryan, for those readers that have not yet read the book and that don't know you very well, tell us a little bit more about your academic background. As someone who's done a fair bit of academic study myself, I know the kind of hours and the years that it takes to achieve the kind of status that you have on an academic level. But practically, where does it all start in terms of your basic training, your research, and then how does it play out to where you find yourself now? How many years have you been a forensic pathologist? And I think I read that you had done something like 9,000 or more autopsies.
Okay. Well, I started in the book by talking about why I went into this field. I started discussing injustice and being bullied, and I cannot take injustice, and how I just evolved into this field. I couldn't also do general medical practice, and I describe in my book how I didn't believe those patients are that innocent. And there are innocent patients, make no mistake, but it was just my roeping, it was my calling. And I mean, I've been studying for 23 years. I've got some 6 degrees, a PhD. I'm very active with publications and books, and I've got fields of interest such as lightning and electrocution. But I just felt that this is all very, just academic, and the public doesn't know what's happening. Like, and I'm all for transparency, and we've come a long way since the old days in Southern Africa, with forensics and our old police, and we've got programs such as CSI, and the public are aware of what's happening. I mean, they know, we call it the CSI effect. They know how criminals are caught and stuff, and what's happening here in South Africa, what's happening in Africa. And I discuss stuff in Africa, like, for example, the disappeared, where forensic pathologists, disappear. They got the International Day of the Disappeared. And, the challenges of practicing in a resource-limited and resource-depleted environment. So, and every day, I'm still studying, I'm still learning. I also say in my book that you shouldn't rest on your laurels. You cannot have stale knowledge. You need to consistently have your ear to the ground and your eye on the horizon. You need to know what's happening on the streets, so to speak, because there could be a new gang that moves in with a new drug, or some new weapon that's come out, or like, for example, in my book I mention, like, in Germany they've got a new way of committing suicide. And I can put it out to your readers because it's in the literature, but you'll literally walk into a bathroom and find someone dead on the floor. You may find a note on the door, what's known as an advanced directive, saying be careful when you enter. You may find the door sealed with tape, but when you enter that bathroom, you just find them dead on the floor, nothing else. And you can do a full autopsy and find nothing. You can test that entire environment, you find nothing. And if you don't know the literature, and if you don't know what's out there, you'll miss this. And it's just to tell your listeners, it's carbon dioxide death. They go and lie on the floor with a chunk of dry ice. And if that thing melts and CO2 is heavier than air, how are you going to find this? You don't know about it. So you have to continuously read. You have to be appraised of what's out there.
Yeah. Would you mind telling us, in not too much graphic detail, of course, about some of your most challenging situations where it was very much not an obvious death and you really had to rely on your expertise to make a finding?
Well, I also address this in the book because, unlike clinical medicine, forensic pathology, you cannot triage cases. So you cannot say, the airway problem is more dangerous than the breathing problem, which is more dangerous than the circulation problem. You may get a case which, on the face of it, looks very simple, yet it may be incredibly complex. Or you may get a case that, on the face of it, seems incredibly complex, and then the cause is just so obvious. And then I discuss in my book a way of thinking, and it's like a mentor to a student. The book is written, as I said, in second person. So I say you've always got to keep murder in mind, because you cannot have a murder, you cannot miss that. So you've got to, number one, assume that they know all the methods. You've always got to keep murder in mind. And even the most simple case may be a concealed homicide. So, and there's plenty of cases. The average forensic pathologist does about 3 or 4 autopsies per person per day. So in this country, we're doing about between 250 to 450 autopsies per person per day. In America, you're not allowed to do more than 250 autopsies per person per year. Okay, so we're doing up to 450 per year, because South Africa has between 40 and 80,000 unnatural deaths per year, with an average of 72,000 autopsies per year, and there's only 56 forensic pathologists in the entire country. So,
Ryan, sorry to interrupt you. Could you give us a breakdown of the exact figures in terms of forensic pathologists per a certain amount of population?
Okay, so we've got 56 qualified forensic pathologists in the entire South Africa. You need about 6 forensic pathologists per million population. So we need about 150 to 300 forensic pathologists in South Africa for it to be paradise. The rest of the autopsies are being performed peripherally by general practitioners with diplomas in forensic medicine. But I think ideal, we should have 150 forensic pathologists in this country.
So essentially, we're running on about 25% capacity, if that, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. We need to draw people into the field and prevent hemorrhage from the field. And I discuss this in the book also.
In terms of the institutional culture of the medical fraternity, what kind of obstacles are there to get a case, to get a conviction, and in terms of the court proceedings? What are the biggest challenges and misconceptions for the legal fraternity, I guess, as well? How do you get the symbiosis or the balance between the medical and the legal sides?
Okay, that is a very complex question. And remember, I wrote my book just discussing forensic pathology, not the entire system. So, you know, for me to discuss the legal system, I'd be going beyond my abilities and responsibilities. You know, obviously this will require a legal expert to find out where their challenges are. You know, as I say, we got our caseload, we must do our medical legal examination, we must do our bit to the best of our ability, get all the special investigations and get that report out. And then I talk about, you know, you can have a state-of-the-art facility with a poor forensic pathologist, or you can have an inadequate facility with an expert forensic pathologist. At the end of the day, it comes down to the report. You want an excellent report so there's no questions to be asked. It's all about absolute truth. It's not about nuances. It's not about loopholes. We just want the absolute truth as we find it on the body.
And that question of truth is, of course, I mean, you've written a book which is nonfiction, but it captures a kind of essential truth about what you do. And you're dealing with different kinds of interpretation. So how do you make sure as a medical professional, as a forensic pathologist, that you, at the end of the day, that you nail the case, that you absolutely as certain as possible that you follow the correct procedures? What are the procedures and protocols in place to make sure that there's oversight and that the process does actually run smoothly?
I love that question because it is about oversight and audit. You know, you need to make certain that you're not making the same mistake with more confidence, you know, and that what you're seeing is actually what you're seeing. And I discuss this also in the book. I say, you know, how certain must you be before you call something? So I give an example of, you know, if you see something on the liver, like for example, there's a condition called herpes hepatitis, which is very classic macroscopically. Now, if I see that, do I call it or do I do histology now to prove it? And if I've proved it there, do I go deeper and do immunohistochemistry to call it? And do I go even further and do electron microscopy to prove it? But look how much resources I've thrown now at this one single diagnosis, which I could have diagnosed macroscopically at the outset. So the real question is, how much money must you throw at something before you would be happy with that answer? So I discuss the economics of health. When do you call it? You know, a grizzled old forensic pathologist has got a no diagnosis rate of about 10%, because about 10% of our cases, you won't find anything macroscopic. You know, and obviously the more junior you go, the no diagnosis rate, strangely enough, is less. So it's like 5% or 3%, because they want to eagerly prove that they know what they found. So you'll find junior pathologists calling it, and they may be totally wrong, but the older and more grizzled you become, your no diagnosis rate goes from 10 to 15%.
What happens effectively in those cases with a 10 to 15%, right? What do you then do? And what is the response from, for instance, a family of a loved one or the deceased? What's the end of the process after you've done your report?
Well, it's about solving puzzles, you know, and are all puzzles solvable? That is the question we discuss here, and I discuss it philosophically in the book. You know, we do the best we can with what we got where we are. You know, this is the mantra for Africa. You know, we do the best we can with what we got where we are, for our time with what we have. I mean, not all facilities have CT scans, not all facilities have MRI scans. So at the end of the day, you've got to work with your senses. And in my book, I even describe a simple case where a fly will help diagnose. For example, that will fly and land on an organ and die, and give you an idea that this is a pesticide death. So, you know, we have to work innovatively here. You know, and also all these fancy schmancy devices may also not assist you at the end of the day if you haven't read well enough. So you can throw as much money at this thing as you like, but if you don't have the insight or the curiosity to look for that solution in that scenario, you may miss it completely. You know, and every day it's about being true to yourself. If we don't know, we consult colleagues, superiors, even overseas. At the end of the day, you have to look yourself in the mirror before you go to bed at night and be sure that you've done the best of your ability.
Is there a kind of genuine collegiality in the community between medical professionals, or is there a fair bit of competition? You know, for people that have no real idea what it's actually like, what is the degree of cooperation between the various people working in the field?
South Africa, we've got a fantastic community, one of the best in the world. We all talk to each other. We're all collegial. You know, there are other places on the planet where, like in one country, there's 3 different systems and no one talks to each other. No names, no actual. So we have a strong, robust, and we've got a long history here in South Africa. So we're very proud. And actually, we've exported some of the best forensic pathologists on the planet that are heading up mortuaries in America and Australia, that are powerhouses, that are teaching their locals how to do gourmet autopsies with nothing.
Sure. I can hear there's a bit of relish in the way that you say that, gourmet autopsies. I can see the absolute passion that you have for your work. Is everyone in the field as passionate as you are? And how do you go about inspiring others that are perhaps not as experienced, maybe a little bit younger? You know, how do you get people to really be as passionate as you are about what you do?
Well, this is an excellent question, and like that's why we want to select people to the field that have the right stuff. Remember the film, The Right Stuff. I mean, we don't want someone that, for example, applied to dermatology or psychiatry and then never got in, and now they want to try forensic pathology. That's not the kind of person we want, because what keeps you going after your 9,000, 10,000, 15,000th autopsy? And I use the metaphor of the professional athlete or neurosurgeon. You know, after that neurosurgeon has done 3,000 necks, you know, what keeps him going in there with the same passion? Or what, you've got to critically and thoroughly interrogate your motives as to why you're doing something. The attrition rate has been unbelievable in this field. In the book, I discuss colleagues that have left to go to anatomical pathology. One colleague is in Britain working in a grocery market packing shelves. You know, and why should we put all that energy and effort and, you know, skin in the game, heart in the game, bone marrow in the game, and then this person leaves the fields? You know, that all that energy and effort for nothing. So we want to choose people that have got staying power, endurance. It is endurance, because you've got to wake up every day, walk into that mortuary, do the autopsies. It's an endurance thing.
What would you say weighs heavier, the actual experience of being in a mortuary, you know, having to look at these bodies day in, day out, with actually very little support and very little break, and not an enormous amount of money? You discuss it in the book. You know, it's not a field that you go into to get rich quickly. What motivates you to, as a human being, out of all the many different professions that you could have chosen, what motivates you to keep going and to not just do your job, but to commit to a standard of excellence? What is it that drives you?
Well, we are all doctors, and we all took the equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath, which is the Geneva Convention. So we all have taken our oath, and it's a deeply personal oath to assist mankind. And even though we work behind the scenes for minimal wages, and we do what we do, we still doctors, and it's about saving lives actually, and it's public health medicine. One of my classic stories I share is, forensic pathologists have to feed back into society. And there's one case where I was in Britain, and it was a coronial court hearing. And what happened was a car hit a woman, and she developed a deep venous thrombosis in the calf, and then she shot a pulmonary embolism and died. And I was sitting there listening and watching. I was a very young doctor at the time, and the judge or magistrate asked the guy who drove the car, why do you think he hit that woman at 4 p.m. on that afternoon? And he responded by saying, at 4 p.m. in the afternoon in Britain at that intersection, he was blinded by the sunlight, and he never saw the woman, and he hit her. So they went and investigated this and found out that the light from the sun is indeed blinding at 4 p.m. at that intersection at that time of the year. And they erected a billboard at that intersection so that no one ever in the future of mankind gets blinded at 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
It makes a real difference. Yeah.
But now, how many deaths must we have in South Africa due to primer stoves or on the, Malota Road? There's a holocaust of deaths, but every year I see deaths, excuse that metaphor, but, every year we see a lot of deaths. And there's no feedback mechanisms. So we need feedback, like what we find has to feed back into society, because you should never have the same type of death twice.
This is perhaps a controversial topic, and I'm sure you won't mind discussing it, but do you find that there's an enormous difference in the deaths that you see between people of middle class and richer classes and the poor? I mean, I think it's a straightforward question on the surface, but can you perhaps unpack that for the readers?
Well, I will chiefly discuss what I said in my book, because I discuss the topic of distributive justice. Yeah. And I say that the problem is actually with the public. So I start the book by saying I met a Professor Thomas Noguchi. We call him the Gooch. I met him at 91 years old, and I met him at 92 years old. First time I met him was at the National Association of Medical Examiners in the USA, and I met him at the International Academy of Forensic Science in Canada. 91 and 92 years old, sharp as a whistle, inspiring. He was the coroner to the stars. And I mean, he did the autopsy on Marilyn Monroe, Robert Kennedy, Sharon Tate, all these famous people. And I mean, people fawn over the man, And, why are the public so fascinated by the deaths of celebrities or presidents, etc., and not, the John Doe or the Jane Doe? Now, what happens if I were to tell you that we've had John Does and Jane Does that turn out to be incredibly powerful or successful people, from other countries that were murdered or killed here in our country, and then they presented to us as unknowns? So we treat all our cases the same, and that's what gave my book, because we are situated in the blind spot of humanity. We see, it's almost like a panel beater, cars coming in. You see all these accidents and all these cars, and just by looking at all these broken cars, you get an insight into what's happening to the cars in the real world, if that metaphor is okay to describe this. And obviously you're going to get fancy schmancy cars, and you're going to get poor cars, but you see what's happening to the cars. And my book is about what's happening to the people, and that's why I wrote this book.
Ryan, I'm quite curious. What would you say would be the most preventable kinds of death that you see? And you really do discuss this in the book, but I think it's incredibly important for readers to know in terms of their habits, changes in diet, things like that, just behavioral patterns. What would you say are the biggest things that people can control and therefore make a difference, and then make a huge difference to your caseload.
Okay, well, at the end of my book, I seek into 10 sagely laws, for the living from the dead. I looked at all these deaths, and you ask yourself, are there any avoidable factors here? What would have prevented this person from ending up on our table? And okay, just as an aside, being a lightning and electrocution enthusiast, the most preventable death would be lightning. When thunder roars, go indoors. Just by following that simple advice, you can save yourself a death by lightning, for example. But then, getting back to my 10 points, we see so many deaths, and I discuss a principle called Lindy's Law in my book, which is, Lindy was a deli in New York that was supposedly famous for its cheesecake, but it became famous for its mathematical principle. So actors used to gossip about how long a play would last, and they worked out that if a play has been running for about 100 days or so, its future predicted run would be 100 days or so. If it's been going for 200 days or so, its future predicted run would be 200 days or so. And I thought to myself, wow, this is actually what happens with human behavior. If a book's been in print for 1,000 years, it will probably be in print for another 1,000 years. If someone has one tattoo, they'll probably get another tattoo. If someone is is a gambler, they're a gambler, and they'll continue gambling. If you're an alcoholic, you probably will be, your pattern is alcoholism. Obviously, to stop that pattern requires a vast injection of energy, and it's entirely inconvenient. But once you know someone's pattern, then I think you've got them. So, for example, we'll have a gunshot victim, and then I'm doing the autopsy, and I find another bullet from a previous gunshot case. Or someone's got scars all over their body from previous accidents or previous fights, because they're prone to get in fights or accidents. So there are patterns in people's lives. And I say, once you know your pattern in your life, then you can prevent it. And that Lindy's Law is so comforting and so terrifying in the same sense, because you can apply this to politics. If you see something going like this for a certain time, you can expect more of this going forward, unless a vast amount of energy is injected into it. Or if you so in a way, that's comforting to know you can expect more of the same. And it's also terrifying because you also know that it will require vast amounts of energy to change something. So, and then I use the metaphor of my muffin tray or my annealing, which you'll have to read in the book to understand about vast amount of energy to set a system to its stable state.
What's been the most satisfying thing for you working in South Africa, particularly with all its challenges, with sometimes challenging institutional culture, with people that don't necessarily understand what it is that you're trying to do? What would you say have been the country's most notable successes in terms of the work that's been done over the past few years?
Okay, well, I'm still here, firstly. I've gone nowhere else. This is my home. I think once the dust of Africa gets into your bone marrow, it's hard to go anywhere else. We are a very resilient culture. Also, it is forensic paradise. What we see here, you won't see anywhere else, I don't believe, like in Europe, or in Sweden or something like that. There are stuff that we see here that is pathognomonically African. And when we do get things right, it is an intangible thrill. You get that little kick from like just doing good. It's totally thankless. No one knows. It's just a little inner kick. There's nothing else I can say about that.
Do you ever really take your work home with you, or is that just a given for the profession? Do you ever manage to switch off? And when you do switch off, where does your mind go? What do you do?
Okay, that's a very common question we get. Like, do you get depressed? Do you take your work home with you, etc.? We are all quite balanced, I believe. Very positive, optimistic people. And when I get home, you got to recover for the next day. So whether you're reading or watch something light on TV, some comedy, etc. But the next day you've got to be fresh, sharp, alert. So it's professionalism. That's what it's about.
When you're not working, are you actually interested in fictive criminal worlds as well? I mean, you think of the explosion that we've seen on Netflix, for instance. I mean, most of us can't imagine going a week without watching a favorite show or a new series that we're going to binge. Do you find that the truth of the forensic things that you see, do you think that any fictive world can match up to that, or is it just a case of the real world just outstripping the fantasy of anything else?
Well, I mean, I've been to the National Association of Medical Examiners conferences, and I've met, for example, Dr. G. And I know that a lot of these programs like CSI, etc., have got fiercely intellectual consultants. So what you're seeing on TV is actually cutting edge stuff. And I discuss some of this cutting edge stuff in my book. There's now homicide by cell phone. You can hack a medical device with your cell phone, like an insulin pump, and kill someone. And there's now laboratories on a chip. So if you find some blood on a scene, you can scoop it up, and it will tell you that the owner of this blood has got blonde hair and blue eyes. And they can work out the diet from your fingerprint. They can time your fingerprint. And there's cutting edge knowledge out there. And these people that sit at home and watch Crime Channel they're terrifying. They know as much as anyone, to be honest with you.
Let's do a very quick, I think we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's do a quick autopsy of the book itself. I think you've done a fantastic job of selling it for your readers, but let's talk about the genesis of the book. You've said that it was about 2 or 3 times the length. How do you then go about deciding what ends up in the book and what doesn't? I mean, you've probably got a fantastic publisher. I mean, I know that you do, but what kind of insights do you get in terms of shaping the kind of story that you want to tell? Because I know that you have a very particular vision of the kind of representation of the field and of your own story that you want to get across. Okay,
that is an excellent question. This book took me about 6 years actually to complete. So I feel Forrest Gumped here, for lack of a better word. I'm totally spent after this book. It was heart, skin, soul, bone marrow in the game. I really wrote it as if I'm going to die, and I just want to put it all out there, what I want to say to the public. The book originally was about 2 to 3 times as long. It has been diluted, watered down, and sanitized, obviously, by lawyers, copy editors, etc. I've had to fight for some stuff in there, and I've had to fight tooth and nail sometimes to get my vision in there. But at the end of the day, I am quite proud of this work. I'm actually very proud of it. I must say,
definitely, you should be.
It was hard. It was really hard. I put it up there. My PhD was hard, but this I put as an equivalent. My PhD took me 8 years. This took me 6 years, and I felt as drained after writing this thing as my PhD. It really was hard because I wrote it in such a way that it can pitch to anyone. So it's
very accessible. It's an accessible book. Yeah.
I wrote it for the layman to the specialist. And it's meant to emotionally hook you from page 1, and it's a confidential, like a confiding, like a mentor protege type of. So I wrote it in second person, and if I didn't share this and I died and I didn't put this in there, I'd have to come back in another life and rewrite it, because I just had to do this. I had to do this. It was in me, and it had to come out.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the difference between having a calling and a job, all right, or a vocation and a job. This was something that you really had to do, and I think it's an essential read for anyone that's interested in the field. Particularly talking about your different chapters. Were there any that were particularly tough for you to write, that you thought, okay, I'm not sure about this? And did you have an ideal reader in mind when you were writing?
Well, I had a fantastic editor, a tour de force by the name of Annie Olafir, who must get a nod to this. I mean, she really is a powerhouse. I mean, from what it was in the beginning to what it is now, is a totally different beast.
Sure. And the most satisfying part for you of the book, if you had to pinpoint one paragraph or one page that you'd say, okay, a reader should read this and then decide if they want to read the book. Do you have a favorite part?
The most favorite part is I'm getting feedback from all over the place, from people that I would not normally meet, and it's having a profound effect on people. It's really affecting people. To me, that odd email or message, I don't know how they're finding me, but anyway, they do. But I've really had some powerful feedback from people that I would never meet, and to know that I'm affecting someone in Australia or wherever, that is an intangible feeling.
We spoke about this a little bit off air, but tell your readers a bit more about your future prospects with the book. Is there a plan to do some translation and then getting the book sort of across the water to overseas markets as well?
Well, I'd love as many people to read this as possible, because it takes you out your comfort zone. It is important for people to read this. It just will affect you. It will just affect you. I would love to do an Autopsy 2.0, but I need to recover first. This has really been a draining episode. I need to recover before I get involved with another project of this nature. And I would love this book, obviously, to be as accessible to as many people as possible. So if this can be translated, I'd love that. I'm getting requests for hard copy overseas, so hopefully it will come to Britain and the USA and Australia within the next year or so. And yeah, it's its own living thing now. I'm actually out of it at the moment. It's its own thing.
Looking ahead, how many years do you think you've still got in the game, in terms of your best years that you're giving to the field? And what would come after, do you think?
Look, I'm still in the trenches. I work. I'm a forensic pathologist in South Africa. I do autopsies. I'm 46 now. Retirement age is 60 to 65. So by the
You've still got about 2 decades left.
By the time you retire in this field, you would have done 20 to 30,000 autopsies, and you'd really be grizzled and haggard by then. I think if you have a good face by that time, then you're a mighty man or woman.
You've still got most of your hair, and you've still got all your teeth.
Sure, for the time being, So, yeah, hopefully to continue doing what I do. It's like any athlete or professional. You hope for the long run.
Yeah, I think we're just about on track to finish on time, and earlier only would send a message, but I think we're doing very well. As a final parting shot, I know the book is being reprinted, or it has been reprinted already. Do you have a message for your readers in terms of what you want them to take away from the book?
There's a couple of themes in the book. So I discuss anti-bullying. That's a massive theme in my book. Victims and targets, people that get victimized and targeted in life. I discuss injustice. It's a massive theme in my book. I cannot take injustice. And why is one injustice worse to some people than another injustice? So that is a massive theme in my book that people can go and work out in their own minds. I also discuss, my 10 pieces of advice that people have to look at in the way they conduct their lives. Do not tempt fate. Care more about yourself. Care more about others, etc., etc. You'll have to read the book for the rest of them. Don't want to give too much away. But it is a bit of a manifesto. It will affect you. It will change your way of thinking. And I just hope it does its own thing.
Sure. I mean, I've read the book. I've read it more than once. I'm definitely sold. And I really wish you all the best, and I think you've got a definite bestseller on your hands. So congrats with that, Ryan.
I hope so. Thank you. And yeah, thanks for your kind reviews and kind words. Very grateful. Thank you.